Hello everyone. Let's have a conversation about optical storage, the CD-ROM drive. The CD-ROM drive was a major advancement in technology as we were progressing and trying to find a way to store lots and lots of data. The CD-ROM technology came along and helped us solve that problem. So the CD-ROM is a pretty good tool. And it came along at a time when we definitely needed to have a place to store more information. I remember a conversation in the hallway at the college with the dean of the math science department, who was also a heavy physics buff, talking about a new technology called a worm drive, write once, read many, that contained every known fact about the sun. And I'm like, well, that's probably a lot of facts. I don't know how many facts we knew about the sun. I wasn't a sun studier, so I'm not really sure what that meant exactly. But he said, these new optical discs are coming with all this information on it, and you can read it and read it and read it forever, and it lasts forever. And I thought, well, that's pretty fantastic. But later on, probably within a year, I was asked to go down into the library and install a CD-ROM drive there. One of the very first ones I ever installed. I didn't know a lot about it, but I was told, pretty much here's the instructions, go for it. So I installed the CD-ROM drive, and it was for the library. And I got the drive up and running, and then they put the disc in, and I was like, well, what is this disc? And basically the disc was books in print. Then I realized just how much information a CD-ROM could store, because that CD-ROM pretty much had every book ever printed, who the author was, what the title was, what the pages were, what it was about. If it was printed, this CD-ROM had that information on it. And to me, that's a lot of information. I could look around the library and grasp the intensity of how much information this particular thing could store. So I was pretty impressed by that, to say the least, of about how much information that we could get out of that overall storage. So that was truly an amazing ability to store information, unlike anything ever before. So let's take a look at how it actually does that. So the CD optical storage basically means anything that was stored using light to store things with. And there were three different kinds that are out there. I'm sure you know of it. The compact disc, the CD, and all of its different arrangements. The DVD, the digital versatile disc, or digital video disc, as it was originally called, got versatile later because we use it for much more, and the Blu-ray disc. And we'll take a look at each one of these individually. With the CD, there's a few families of the CD. The CD-ROM, which is a read-only, sometimes we refer to it as the worm drive, as I mentioned earlier. Write once, read many. It can hold up to 650 megabytes to 700 megabytes of data. At first, it was 650. And then later, they found a way to squeeze a little bit more room on it and got it up to 700 megabits of data. The CD-DA, which is the digital audio, I think that format actually reached the marketplace first before computers got a hold of it. But it was designed for 74 minutes of continuous music, so you wouldn't have to flip the album over halfway through. For you vinyl buffs, you know what I'm talking about, but some of you go, vinyl? What's that? That's what I put in my dashboard. Yeah. So it was designed to hold Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and that might be a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire question, or a question on trivia that you might be finding yourself answering. I don't know exactly what the Ninth Symphony is, but, it was designed to hold it. Later versions, when they got to the 700 megabyte, also held 80 minutes of music or digital audio. The first CD ever available in the world was Billy Joel's 52nd Street, the first commercial CD recording ever released. So we've got a lot was going on there in the music world as we were trying to figure out what to do with our music. It also fell into the concept of being able to store data for us. Later versions of the CD-R, meaning the recordable, writes on the disc, but it's not changeable. And that's kind of what we're talking about with the worm drive. You could make changes to your CD-R data. What basically it would do is write that information to a new location on the disk and delete and just stop identifying the previous version, so you could kind of write over it. Nobody really wants to do that, but until the disk is full, and then you can't edit or add any more to it. The first one was available for about $50,000 in 1988. Later version, a 2X version, came out in 1991. That sold for $12,000. And then the 4020i from Hewlett Packard, I actually do have one still in the box, never used. Sold for less than $1,000 in 1995, and really made it affordable. The prices just kept coming down from there to get these recordable media into our hands and use it to back up our data. Because at the moment, you know, that was what we had to do. We had data, we had lots of hard drives. Hard drives were failing. Where do you have your data backed up? Put it on a CD. Technically lasts forever. They say indestructible technology, but fly one across the room, use it as a coaster, and you'll find out quickly that it's not indestructible. But if you treat it nice, it should last in storage. Magnetic media, tape media, for example, only has a shelf life of 10 years. So all those Disney VHS movies that I bought for my children when I was, when they were growing up, pretty much worthless now. After 10 years, the glue that holds it all together starts to deteriorate, so its shelf life is pretty limited. But DVDs, they say, can last thousands of years as long as you've got the media or a drive to read them. And as we're finding out, that may be more difficult than they originally believed. The CDRW was the last version of it. Rewritable, can be written to multiple times, at least 1,000 times or more. And you can change the data and it will actually go through that process. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at the disk itself. So I drew this up here to fill up one board and have a good conversations about it. So the CD itself is basically a plastic polycarbonate type of device, piece of plastic more or less. Inside the plastic it has an aluminum alloy. Aluminum's highly reflective, so they use the aluminum alloy. And then when they make the original disc, they have little grooves in it. They make it flat, and then they burn little pits in it. When they make the original, which the flats are called lands, the grooves are called pits. The lands represent a 1 because it is reflective. The pits represent a 0 because it's non-reflective. So 1s and 0s, basically the laser light goes through, reflects off the surface, comes back down through a prism, goes through a photocell, and the output of the photocell is actually the data that's involved. The laser diode is a 700 nanometer laser diode, 780 nanometers laser. And what is that? Well, there's a spectrum of light. We all know the rainbow, the color of rainbows. They all have a different wavelength to the color. And what we found out is that you can go out and produce lights in that wavelength. And this particular laser is in the red wavelength, somewhere in that nature of 780 nanometers for the infrared. The CD itself has a label on the top of it. You write on. You don't want to write on the label because this polycarbonate structure this is a lot closer than I have it drawn here, this aluminum alloy. And you could literally scratch some of that aluminum alloy off if you wrote too hard on the label itself. So the disc really, when it's burned at the factory and you get it, this is like a regular CD that you would be playing your audio on, has these pits and lands in the laser, and all this data is captured. And that's pretty much what we get. We get the disc, we play the disc, we don't worry about anything else, and we make it all work for us. The data on the disc is not stored in sectors like the old hard drive. It starts from the center and grooves itself out in a spiraling location so they can fit more data on the surface than it could, say, if it was a hard drive. So that helps out a lot in order to get more surface space available. So this is the basic operation of a CD. So how do we get a CDR? Well, how do we get this pits and lands written? Well, the concept behind the pits and the lands down here is that we use the CDR, and we have the same aluminum alloy in the top of it, but we have this organic dye that we put over the aluminum alloy, and we're able to, in its natural state, it is basically clear and see-through, so that the laser light comes up, hits the surface and comes back down with the data, so it would be considered a 1. But if we choose a laser, we have a right laser this time. The right laser can actually, it's 10 times more powerful than the read laser. So we have 2 lasers on a burner. The 10 times more powerful actually heats up that organic dye anywhere between 482 degrees and 572 degrees to actually burn that organic dye to a point where it's no longer reflective, and therefore that is now considered a pit. even though it really is just a block dot, so to speak, or a burnt dot in the organic dye. It represents a non-reflective layer. So as the laser goes back and reads it, it sees the organic dye as clear through or reflective off of the aluminum alloy, and anything that was burned by the laser itself to be non-reflective as a 0. So this is where the ones and zeros come from, and the concept of let's burn a CD. When you want to burn a CD, they really are talking about burning it when you get it to 482 degrees up to 572 degrees. That's really burning the organic dye that's inside of it. So this is, once it's burned, it's done. The CDR, once you're finished writing to it, it's pretty much done. You can't go back and change it. But we know that there's a CDRW. So let me switch sides here and take a look at this picture that I've drawn. The CDRW, not much of a difference in the way the laser operates, but it's the internal polycrystalline state of a mixture that they put in here in organic media, that when it's in its natural state, it's reflective. Being in polycrystalline state, it's reflective. And when we burn it or change its pattern, heat it up a little bit, it becomes an amorphous state, which is non-reflective, so it's opaque. So basically, we're going to switch back and forth to the polycrystalline and the amorphous. How's that done? When we heat up the polycrystalline state to 932 degrees to 1292 degrees Fahrenheit, it actually changes the crystalline structure to make it opaque. Then if we just warm it up and not burn it up, we come back to a reflective state, only at 392 degrees Fahrenheit. So at 392 degrees Fahrenheit, it changes an opaque back to clear. And then if we take it from 932 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, it turns the clear back to opaque. And there go getting the organic dye to represent the pits and the lands of a normal CD. So you really have that ability to do this multiple times. It could be written to over 1,000 times, where it literally can restructure those crystalline structures to a point where they can be opaque and you can't see through them, that it doesn't reflect light, or they can be crystalline and you can see through them and it will reflect light. So we can do that with these dyes back and forth. To me, that is a modern miracle at how we're even able to possibly do that. Taking a dye, what were they doing when they said, "Oh, let's take this, and if we melt it, look, it doesn't go back to the same state. If we heat it up really hot, it gets opaque, and if we cool it down and heat it up just a little bit, it becomes polycrystalline or clear again." So really, really cool stuff in that technology, and that's pretty much what the CDR or the CD has to offer us. Pits and lands, grooving, working on a spiral track, and being able to represent ones and zeros through pits and lands, either as it's stamped at the factory. And there's a really good picture on how the whole factory stamp, when you buy a factory-made CD, is made, where they make the actual die itself out of glass and all that kind of stuff. And you're able to stamp out millions of them so that they can sell them all around the world as CDs. And we don't buy a lot of CDs anymore, but in case you do, that would be where those come from. They're stamped at a mastering process. They have the master, and then they can stamp the polycrystalline structure with the aluminum alloy in it and actually get the overall ones and zeros that you need to create that data and put that back out there. So on the CD side of things, that's pretty much what we're looking at here. We'll erase the board and put on what the DVD is all about, so we can take a little bit of a look at that. Not much difference between the CD and the DVD, just the ability to store more data, because the information is more condensed on the disk itself. Disk is the same size, data is more condensed, and then we find out about writing multiple layers as opposed to just one layer inside the disk. Okay, so we'll look at that. Let's take a look at the DVD drive. The DVD, digital versatile disc, digital video disc, was available. The standard came out in 1995, but didn't really become available until about 1997. And those sold for about $1,000 each. Pretty expensive little thing to have. It was developed by a company, a forum, to avoid what they refer to as the beta versus VHS. Well, what is the beta versus VHS? Well, there were two standards for video cassette tapes, the VHS standard and the beta standard. Rumor has it that the beta standard, and there was two sides to everybody. There were the beta people and there was the VHS people. And the VHS people liked their VHS and the beta people liked their beta. And the video stores had to carry both. So that because there were two different formats, there were two different kinds of players. And it was a big argument and a big problem for most of the entire time until VHS pretty much ended up winning out. They say that beta was a better plan. They said that the beta boat got to Hawaii before the VHS boat, so Hawaii was pure beta people as opposed to VHS. Better format, just a better way of recording, way they put the tape out, just some differences that required, two different players, two different sets of cartridges and tapes, so it became a big problem. So to try to avoid that, DVD got together with a forum and said, hey, we're going to get together, we're going to put together this video standard, and everybody's going to agree on the standard, and it's going to be compatible throughout all the devices. Well, that worked kind of for the most part until they couldn't figure out how to come up with a universal format for editing, a recording format. So members that were primarily responsible for the CD era broke off and started their own alliance called the DVD minus or the DVD plus RW Alliance, which is really the plus RW Alliance and the plus RW drives are probably much the universal standard out there. They were better, faster, stronger, whatever you want to call it, but they became the de facto standard. And the rest of the group ended up developing the DVD-R standard or RW standard, and they pretty much took care of that business. So they a little bit different, between the two of them, but not a whole lot in the overall standards of how the drives work. Most drives or DVD drives will read the plus RW or the dash RW. The original storage size was about 4.7 gigabytes, single layer, 133 minutes of video, 3 channels of audio, and 4 channels of subtitles, and you could record up to 240 minutes of video onto a single DVD player, which made it very useful. Obviously, it was what the movie industry wanted, to release tapes or to get rid of the videotapes and to move on to something that was much more durable than the VHS tapes. So they moved in that way. So similar construction to the CD, but because it's a 650 nanometer laser, the dots can be smaller, the pits can be smaller, so the whole groove about it, the spiral, even a tighter spiral, allows for more and more data to be stored in the same basic size, because a CD and a DVD are exactly the same size. So there were 4 different standards that existed out there for the most part and still do. We have the DVD-5, which is the 4.7 gigabytes. Now, it pretty much has a single side and a single layer that it reads through. The laser, 650 nanometer, just like the CD, goes up and reads the pits and lands, stores 4.7 gigabyte of data. There was a label on the top, a substrate, then an adhesive, then a recording layer, 0, side 1, and then a substrate at the bottom, just kind of making room for what's about to come. That was the DVD-5, single-sided, single layer. Then we have the DVD-9, 8.5 gigabytes, single-sided dual layer, where we have 2 different lasers. One reads layer 0 and the other reads layer 1. So you can have recording layer 1 and recording layer 0 on side 1. So you can have it set that way. So 2 lasers, read it, give you 8.5 gigabytes, single-sided dual layer. Then DVD-10 is a 9.4 gigabyte standard. It has a single layer on each side, so you literally had to flip the disc over to read both sides. So you could have a double-sided single layer, basically a layer 0 on both sides, side 1 and side 0, to get us up to the 9.4 gigabytes. And then the last DVD-18, 17.1 gigabytes, double-sided dual layer, meaning that you had 2 layers on each side of the disc. How did that work? Basically, each layer had a different focal point, so you could cut through the first layer and get to the second layer and focus on that, and then the first layer would focus just on the first layer, and that way you could have both layers existing at the same time, and then the data never caught up to each other or got in the way of each other. So early double-sided dual layers had to be flipped. Later they just put heads reading on the top and the bottom at the same time to allow, a whopping 17.1 gigabytes of data to be stored on the DVD itself. So those are pretty much the standards that about capacity that go along. Obviously, the DVD dual layer pretty much ended the DVD world. It is what most DVD players are capable of reading. Maybe it's like DVD single layers were out there prevalently. To get to the dual layer, you had to get a special DVD disc to buy, and then when most of the discs were leaving the marketplace, they all pretty much read every kind of disc that existed out there, whether it be DVD or CD. And then last but not least, the Blu-ray disc, which we haven't talked about yet, pretty much superseded the DVD and has become the de facto standard out there for anybody who wants to do video disc or have a disc in their machine. They're probably going to do the Blu-ray disc. So that's the different formats of the recording capabilities of a DVD. Your drives have BIOS or some firmware on them. And in order for them to understand these higher levels of DVD, they may have to have a firmware update in order to get that to take place. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Let's take a look at just a little bit individually about the different styles of DVD player that exist out there, whether it's Dash R or Plus R, and see what those differences mean on the next screen. Okay. There are many different dashes and things that go after the DVD player in this standard in these formats these days. So let's take a look at them individually. The DVD Dash R, pretty much 1997 when it was released. Write once DVD, compatible with most players. There's generally two types of Dash R: authoring and general. The general is just for data using. Authoring is a higher quality, and the drives must match in order to record one versus the other. DVD Dash R came first, and then DVD R-RW followed it. Rewritable like a CD, up to 1,000 rewrites. Compatible with most drives. Everything works out according to plan. It's not as compatible as the DVD Dash R, but it is compatible. Now, the DVD Plus R was introduced by the DVD Alliance, the same for the most part as the DVD Plus RW in 2001. The DVD Plus R actually was derived from the DVD Plus RW standard. So the DVD Plus RW standard came first, and it has some minor differences in design with the Dash RW, but it was pretty much, it was capable of drag and drop. It had a lot of good features. Referred to as the Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is the drag and drop capability, the ability for me to drag files to my DVD player, drop them on there, and actually burn them without having any difficulty or using any extra software. The DVD Plus RW, least expensive, easy to use, fastest and most compatible, pretty much the standard throughout what most people are using out there. It's been around since 2001. And it's probably the most recognized standard out there. It's not that the Dash RW isn't still out there, but most drives will read either or, and personal preference as to whether or not you want to use one or the other. You just want to make sure that you're capable of using one versus the other. One that's pretty not compatible is the DVD Dash RAM. It was designed for data storage before the standard format was actually introduced. Therefore, the DVD Dash RAM not really compatible even with the most of the DVD ROM drive players that exist out there. So you got to watch that if you're into that DVD Dash RAM or find something that's across it. You might say, oh, why doesn't this work? Why doesn't this read? The DVD Dash RAM was probably the right answer. And then there are a couple other DVD Plus R dual layer and DVD Dash R dual layer. These are, basically came out 2003 and 2005 retrospectively. Just introducing that next layer of capacity and data storage using the dual layer, whether it's dual layer single-sided or dual layer double-sided, to get that extra storage layer out there that we needed. So that kind of covers what the DVD Rs and dashes are all about in a general sense of the reason. There's some compatibility issues you got to watch out between the two of them, but like I said, most drives today, if you still have one, will pretty much read most of the different formats that exist out there. So there's the DVD side of things. We'll look at a few other key interesting factors about this whole optical technology next. The last disc format we need to discuss just to touch base with is basically the high definition or the HD style of DVD players. In 2006, we got two styles that hit on the market, the HD DVD-DVD and the BD or Blu-ray disc. Again, VHS versus beta. The argument exists that both formats cannot survive together in the same world. Pretty much came true. It was a competitive standard. The HD DVD, pretty much 15 gigabytes for high definition video. But because everybody lost interest or lost support for it, it was pretty much abandoned in 2008. So a couple of years after it was introduced, it was abandoned. The Survivor Blu-ray runs on a 405 nanometer laser, which is in the blue laser light spectrum. That's why we call it the Blu-ray. It has smaller pits, smaller lands, smaller spiral, tighter groove. Everything about it just miniaturizes because the light can be smaller. Therefore, the disc can hold much more data. How much more data? The BD-ROM itself comes at 25 gigabytes of storage. That's enough for 11.5 hours of video in standard definition or 4.5 hours of video in high def. The BDR, 25 gigabytes again of recordable data, up to 50 gigabytes dual layer, and 23 hours of video, again 1080p, 9 hours capable of high definition video storage. The BDRE, rewritable Blu-ray disc, 25 gigabytes and 50 gigabytes dual layer, rewritable up to 1,000 times as well. And then the BDRE XL rewritable, the final advancement there, 100 to 128 gigabytes of storage of data. So these are pretty much the defuncto standards for optical storage out there right now, as well as their capacity for high definition capable recording. The Blu-ray disc is still probably will be our final optical disc that exists out there in the world of optical, because we can get so much flash drives and store so much data on those these days that flash drive seems to be the preferred method of storage for most of our backing and archiving of data. I'm still a firm believer that if you want to keep it for a long period of time, you want to burn it optically. However, if there's no optical drives to read it in the future, then maybe perhaps that's not the right answer. So, but you know, the Blu-ray disc, definitely 25 gigabytes is a pretty good chunk, but may not be enough for most of us to store what we're looking to store. So we'll see how long it lasts, but for now it is the standard that we have to talk about. Let's look at a couple other key points about the whole optical storage in the next slide. Let's take a look at some of the CD disc formats, page 617 in your book. These are the books that pretty much wrote the specifications for what the standard for optical storage was going to be. From what I understand, it's basically just the color of the book that they wrote the notes down in that pretty much make up the difference. Red Book 1980 was the original CD audio specification, how we could make a CD to store digital music. Yellow Book 1983 was the version that included the CD-ROM. Green Book 1986, CDI Interactive. These were interactive, basically a CD that would work with the serial port in your machine, and then depending upon how you would answer certain questions or do certain things, different stuff would play or come out of the CD, so it was kind of interactive. We had some of those for the health department, so you could interact with people, and based on a scenario, you would say what medicine you wanted to give them, and based on what you gave them, it either cured them or made them sicker, and you had to react along those lines. So, CDXA, extended architecture, combines the yellow and green book specs to just get a little bit more capable storage out of the drives themselves. 1989, along with that, came the CDR and CDRW, the ability to record and rewrite discs in that specification. Photo CD or CD-P became the photo standard for picture CDs. Walgreens was quick to jump on these. They envisioned that you would have a separate machine laying on top of your TV at home with a video picture that would allow you to do nothing but play video picture discs over and over again, so you could just watch your photos over and over again. I have that as a screensaver now, but they were trying to come up with something completely different with it then. White Book introduces the VCD or video CD. Allows you to play up to 74 minutes of video and audio, low definition by all means, but still the capability of playing video with your CDs, not something that we had out there before. Blue Book is the CD Extra, audio and videos for music industry. I remember having an Ozzy Osbourne CD that you put it in a CD player and it would play the music, but if you put it in a computer, it would play the videos. So it was capable of doing both. So a good CD extra there. Purple Book, a 2000 CD double density, 1.3 gigabytes. I never did much of those. I never saw anybody that had any of those, but the specification existed. The Scarlet Book, or super audio disc, you could hold 4.7 gigabytes of high density audio on the disc. Again, I don't remember seeing any of those, but the specification says they do exist. And then dual disc, CD on one side, DVD on the other. Again, not sure where these would come from or where they were actually used at, but the specification on page 617 actually calls it out. So I thought I would just run through those for you just so you get some idea as to what those different books are. Now, in your book, each one of these get a whole paragraph or more section of the chapter to talk about individual changes and things that have evolved out of each one of these generations of the book to bring us more and more usability and functionality out of our optical technology. So if you want to look a little deeper into that, be my guest. So one of the things we also have to talk about is the optical file systems. Though the book values define some of the things that could be done with the CDs and the drives as far as what they're capable of, it didn't specify quite as much the detail of the file systems that could actually go on the drive. The first one, High Sierra, was developed out there, basic standard volume and file structure that everybody could follow so that everybody could use the disk in the same way. And it came with a universal disk driver or optical driver called MSCDEX.exe, which came from DOS and Microsoft. So they would supply the driver so that everybody could have access to a driver that was generic for pretty much all use for all devices, standardized across the board. The next ISO 9660 was a revised High Sierra that included some more specifications to ensure compatibility, that file names had to use A through Z, 0 through 9, or underscore in the file naming convention. It did use the 8.3 naming convention that DOS put out there, where the file names have the 8 characters, up to 8 characters, and the extension up to 3. There were some other limitations that existed in the 9660 as well. So you can take a look at those out there in the book as well. This, again, is on page, what page is this actually on? This actually starts on 629. 629. I'll put that up here for you. 629 in your book, so you can get a little bit more in detail if you choose to do so. Extension of the Juliet ISO 9660 to allow larger file and directory names and the structure for Windows 95 now. So this is the time frame for Windows 95 to come out there. After this, the universal disk format for packet writing treats disk pretty much like magnetic storage. The universal disk format, or UDF reader or driver, allowed for basically treating the drive as a magnetic storage device so that you could treat it like a floppy or an additional magnetic media for your machine. Mac had their own version of a filing system called Mac HFS. Used exclusively by Mac. If you formatted your disk with HFS, you wouldn't be able to read it in a PC, so you had to make sure you were aware of what was going on there. Rockridge brought in some support for Unix and POSIX so that you could use the optical media for both of those two platforms as well. And then last but not least, the Mount Rainier specification. Also has the common name of EasyWrite, which allows us to drag and drop files over to the drive and allow them to be burned onto the disk without having to use anything special. It had better defect management, so you could work around defects in the disk themselves. Direct access to the filing system in 2K clusters. Background formatting for instant use. So you put the disk in, you used to have to wait pretty long time for the disk to format. Mount Rainier says pop it in and we'll format it in the background while you're getting ready to use it. Standard command set and a standard physical layout of the actual disk as well followed the Mount Rainier specifications. So these are just some file system formats so that if you don't have a file system format and everybody chooses to write their own stuff, disk incompatibility would exist on a much larger scale. So these different optical system file structures existed out there for better compatibility issues all the way across the board. So let's talk for a brief second about copying music or copying videos. It is by no means ethical to copy video and copy music, but it is possible to do both of those things. Ripping or copying the disc, the art of copying a music diskette is called ripping. Original audio playback for CDs was through a 4-wire left and right audio connection from the drive itself to your audio connection on your system board. The playback was in single speed, so you had to play it at the actual speed a CD player was. One of the deals with Fisher and Philips, when they first developed and turned the CD-ROM over to the computer industry, was that every CD-ROM that they would ever actually make would be responsible to play back digital audio discs. So because of that, there's been the first releases of the discs themselves had a 4-wire audio patch cord that went from the actual CD player to the audio board inside your PC to allow for playback. Later, that was replaced by DAE, which is digital audio extraction, because the processor speed created was better. The interface to the DVD drive or the CD drive was better. You could actually pull off the data and encrypt it in its raw form and play that music back. The processor would decode it and turn it back into analog music so that you could actually play it back. So it was a little bit of a tit for tat kind of thing that said, hey, here's your audio. You can play it back through the audio connector, or you can play it back through the data. Ripping is the art of actually stripping that audio data off of the drive in its raw format as the disk drive in full speed. So if it's a 24x example of a drive, instead of having to play it back at 1x to get the data off of it, you could rip it off at the 24x or the full speed of the drive, which definitely decreases the amount of time it takes to copy a disc. Music Only contains a special track that there are for music only discs that exist out there. They actually have a special track embedded into them that will allow and work with the music burners or the DVD copiers or CD copiers that will prevent you from copying a copyrighted or copy protected disc. So that you would buy the music only disc and you would have to use those in order to copy them and to put those, and that's for the external players that existed out there for copying. Look to keep you from making full, complete, uninterrupted copies of what's essentially a digital duplicate of the original disc that drove the industry crazy, not only in the audio business, but in the video business as well. They don't want you making and copying their stuff without them making any money out of it. So copy protection is basically to keep you from making original copies. There are a few different kinds of things out there. Digital rights management, or DRM, can prevent you from burning a song to a CD without an unlimited amount of time. So if you take the disc, you rip it to your computer, it basically puts rights on that file that says, hey, you can copy this off to another disc once or twice, but if you do it too many times, it's going to stop you from being able to do that. Sony at one time actually, with their audio CDs, loaded a rootkit on your machine, a virus kind of software that would allow you, disallow you to make copies or duplicates of their CDs so that you couldn't make money by copying them and selling them off right. So the audio world is one side and the digital world or DVD world is another. DVD protections that exist out there, RPC, regional playback control. These are markings that are put on it so that you can't, I can't get a movie from China and play it over here, or I can't take my movies and play them over there, so that they know where the movie originated from, so that they could make copies, and if you made copies, then it wouldn't play, and you couldn't sell them around the world kind of thing. So there's regional playback control. CCS, content scrambling system. It was the original content scrambling of what was going on with your disc when you played it back. If you tried to make a copy of it, it would scramble the signals and give you a wavy kind of thing. So if you took it from the disc, copied it to your hard drive, and then played it back, it wouldn't play well. But several students in college found a way to rewrite that programming to allow it to decrypt that encryption on the fly and beat it, so that beat is out there. APS, analog protection systems, and protect disk basically changes the structure of the disk itself so that it can't be recopied bit by bit because it wouldn't play or wouldn't work in other machines. Blu-ray has several out there, ACS, Advanced Access Content System, as well as BD Plus, a BD-ROM mark. These are all different ways of hiding or locking the software so that it can't be repeated or copied. And then Cinevex displays messages about the copy protection rights of the drive and disallows you from making copies there. Like the book says, there are a lot of copy protections out there, and none of them are copy proof, because wherever there's a copy protection, somebody out there has found a way to beat that copy protection and make copies of these discs. So if you're really diligent and you want to go out there and find a way to copy your media, so be it. So remember that copying a music CD is called ripping, and making a music CD is called burning. So those two terms are ripping and burning, and you'll know them and see them and recognize them when somebody spits those words at you. You probably already knew this already. You've been ripping and burning since you were born. I get it. All right, thanks. We'll go on to the next subject. Another feature about CD or optical drives that we have to talk about is the speed. How fast is your drive? The speed of the drive, how quickly can we get data off of the drive or even write to it when we're trying to record. Transfer rate is one of the first things that comes to mind. How fast can we transfer? How quickly can the drive read data and transfer it to the host computer? There are a couple of ways that we can measure this, or that we talk about this speed. The first one is the X factor. Not the TV show, but the speed at which a drive can transfer is usually an X, or a multiple of the original base speed at which the drive could transfer data in the first place. For CDs, that base speed is 153.6 kilobits per second. So if it's a 2X, it's twice that, or 2 times 153.6 kilobits per second, or 307,200 kilobits per second. And then if it's 8X, it's something like 8 times 153.6, or 1,228,800 kilobits per second transfer rate. Maximum usually after 12 or 20X is somewhere just on the outside or the outer edge of the disk. There is a disk out there called a true X that means no matter where you read the data from, it comes across as quickly as it possibly can. It's a steady or an average of it all. So you might say it's average transfer rates that we like to look at as well. And the book, inside your book, has these speeds on pages 642 and 643 for CD, and for DVDs on pages 644 and 645. The DVD's base rate is 1,385 kilobits per second. That's its base rate. So, a 2X of that would be double it, 4X, double, quadrant that, 20X or 20 times that. The BD, or Blu-ray disc, its base speed is 36 megabits per second. So it has a pretty good base speed concept going on there. So it's in the megabits range instead of the kilobits range. The other way to measure it is the speed at which the drive actually runs and the way data is pulled off of the drive. First one we'll talk about here is CLV, which is constant linear velocity. Since CDs started to be in the music industry first, a constant stream of audio data had to come off of the CD, and that had to be constant, otherwise you get jerks in your music and broken up music, and that wouldn't be any good for anybody, so there had to be a constant speed. So they would have the constant feed of data coming off of there, so the speed at which the data came off had to be constant. 2X would double that speed, 4X, 4 times the speed, until you get about 12X, and then you get the speed up somewhere around 2,568 RPMs, or revolutions per minute, all the way up to 5,959 revolutions per minute. And that in itself could really, really lead to some very loud, it sounds like a vacuum sweeper is running inside your PC, very noisy effects. And then trying to get motors and electronics to actually switch from very low speeds to that high speed maximum wasn't easy, and there weren't a lot of motors that could do it. So they pretty much reached their maximum at that point. So right around 12X, they started to change the way we get data off of it, and that change became CAV, or constant angular velocity. The disk spins at a constant RPM, and data transfer rates at the outer tracks is slower than the ones at the inner tracks. So you pretty much can go, we're going to read the data. It's going to be at average. The drive's going to sound normal. It's going to read the data faster in one part of the disk than it does in the other. For all intended purposes, it's still faster than that 1X that we started with. So that was a way of achieving much higher transfer rates and higher speeds out of the drive. Now, most of the DVDs that exist out there now use a combination, somewhat of a zoned CLV, where the constant linear velocity changes based on where the disc is actually being read from, so that it can go faster on the inner sides and slower on the outer and that kind of thing. Or they use a partial CAV, or partial constant angular velocity. For the lower speed reads, it uses the high speed RPM, and for the larger reads, the larger data speeds, it'll change and increase performance there. So based on a balance of those, they figured out the best way to get the maximum transfer speed and keep your CD from flying out the window, should you choose to do so. I remember some of the first CDs, when you opened the tray, if you opened it while it was accessing, that disc was spinning so fast when the tray opened, it would fly across the room. So nothing good ever comes from your CD flying across the room. Access time is the delay between the drive receiving a command and its actual reading the first bit of the data that it gets off of there. So access times are also out there in the book. And then last but not least, to improve performance, we use buffering and cache. Buffer and cache, just like cache is for the processor, is really super fast memory. This time it'll be on the drives itself or on a controller card, should it be a different interface. But you put some memory in there and away you go. My best story is I went to the Bureau of Public Debt in Parkersburg, West Virginia, or Parkersburg, Virginia. I'm sorry, it's not West Virginia. What is the Bureau of Public Debt? Well, anyone who ever takes out a cash or a bond works at the Bureau of Public Debt. All the data is kept there at this Parkersburg, Virginia building, so to speak. And what they had was they had a whole bunch of tapes. Tapes would pass off this information, and people could read how much their bond was worth and get this information basically out of it. And they were switching it over to large DVD or CD writing apparatuses, where the one CD would hold pretty much a whole room of these tapes that they were using. I was there way back when teaching them A+ certification, and they showed me this CD player, the big jukebox looking thing. It had a disc in it that was every bit of 24, 36 inches around, and there were 4 or 5 of them. And what would happen is the DVDs would be pulled and they would be read, and then most of what was on the disc would be put into a cache buffer. And that cache buffer was really just a filing cabinet drawer full of nothing but memory banks. So it literally took the data off the disk, put it into memory, and then freed up the reader for the next person who wanted to read a disk. So it was sharing. So it was a pretty cool device where you could have all these disks in one small container, and everybody could access them at different intervals. And the biggest part of that was all the cache. It's probably the most memory I ever saw in one location in my life, and it was in like a filing cabinet drawer on the side of this great big CD reader. So buffers are out there to really improve upon the performance as well. Just different things, anything we can do to tweak to get the better speed, better transfer rates out of our CD or DVD or Blu-ray disc, the better. And that's what pretty much this board is about. So there you have it. Okay. Last but not least, an important part of the chapter we need to talk about is interfacing. How do we hook up our drives? Now, I got a little video on the hardware side of things, as I always do, of all the pieces that I would show you normally in class. So we'll take a look at that. But let me just give you the brief overview. The first CD-ROM drives that ever existed was a SCSI hard drive. The SCSI CD-ROM. Remember, I talked about the books and print CD I put in for the library. It was basically a SCSI controller that would plug into my ISA expansion slot, and then through the back of the machine hook up to this external DVD or CD drive that would allow it to read that CD and bring that information into the computer so the computer could use it. For the most part, that's the way CD-ROM drives were. If you wanted one or you needed one for the first 4 or 5 years, in order to get a CD-ROM drive, it had to be in the SCSI format. It wasn't until later under the IDE that we used the PATA connectivity. Again, we didn't call it PATA then, we just called it IDE, but it used the 40 conductor cable, and then later on the 80 conductor cable as we got to the ATA 6 and above specifications or so. The data cable, standard power connection, and remember the older word, ATAPI, Advanced Technology Application Packet Interface, makes it possible for us to actually use a CD or DVD drive on the IDE or PATA bus. Now remember, on the PATA side of things, if I'm going to add a DVD or CD to my PATA chain, if it's the only device on the chain, it will be the master. If it is a device on the chain with a hard drive, the hard drive must be the master on the PATA chain, because the hard drive has to have its own controller run it, because a CD or DVD-ROM drive does not know how to control a hard drive. So therefore, you can't tell the hard drive to wait for commands from the CD, because the CD will never give it commands to run the hard drive. So if a hard drive is on the chain with a CD-ROM drive, the hard drive must always be the master and the CD-ROM must always be the slave, because the CD-ROM does not know how to control the overall hard drive. Now, it's not like the hard drive on your computer is going to control the CD-ROM either. The master-slave just gives it bus controlling capabilities to allow the CD to talk and communicate on that bus when it's chosen to do so. As long as the master's not using it, the CD can. Let's see, again, if there's no hard drive present, you could have two CD-ROM drives, one be the master and one be the slave. Unlike hard drives, again, they're not controlling each other. They're just getting priority on the bus, the PATA bus. Now remember, there'll be two PATA interfaces, a primary and a secondary in some of the older machines. So you could have the CDs on one, the secondary, and your hard drives on the other, the primary. If you only have one, then you're going to have to share. I think the computer that we'll use in class is going to share the PATA hard drive and the PATA CD-ROM drive. So you will have to watch those master-slave configurations when you put those into your computer and make them work. Also, we have latest and greatest these days. Most DVDs and CD-ROM drives are of the SATA variety. They use the 7-conductor data cable and the 15-conductor power cable to hook them up. Real simple. You just plug it into a free SATA port and plug it into power, and everybody's happy, and away they go. There are other versions of CD and DVD drives that existed out there. You can get a USB attachable one. If I need to get something off a DVD, I can plug it in through the USB connector and get a DVD that's external along those lines. Firewire, Thunderbolt, I'm sure you can get pretty much any interface of DVD that you'd like to get connected to your machine. In the early days, we used the parallel port to actually run a DVD. Like on laptops that didn't have an optical drive, we could plug in an optical drive through the parallel port and actually get it to use and work with that drive. That was referred to as a backpack CD. So you could actually get a DVD drive hooked to an older style computer so that you could load it instead of having to do it one floppy at a time. Remember, nothing about that is fun at all. Well, when it comes to loading, there are a couple of options that exist out there. You hit the button on the front, the tray opens, the coffee cup holder, as some people like to call it. You put the CD in there and it pulls it inside the drive. We'll take a little bit of closer look at that when we review the hardware. So that's the normal, pretty much everybody has it. They just lay in the ones that are for the desktop. They'll snap into the ones that are for the laptop so as to hold them in place and get a much better connectivity on it, just because the drive is smaller and they can't use the magnetics that are involved to hold the CD in normal desktop drives. The Caddy system also exists out there. That first optical drive that I put in where the book's in print, the actual CD went into a plastic case, and I'll show you that too, where the disc actually goes in and like a sleeve that pulls across, it opens up and it reads or allows access to the media. This is a great thing to have when you were working in an environment that's kind of greasy. I like to say the automotive environment used to have CDs about different automobiles that they could pull in and put into the machine, but because they never washed their hands because they were in the middle of something trying to find data, they would grab the CD and get their fingerprints all over it, and that can lead to some problems or issues with the disc. So they would put them in caddies and use a caddy reader in that kind of environment. Any kind of dirty, nasty environment, you might want to use a caddy system to help keep things moving a little bit longer. Also, we have jukebox. I had a jukebox CD player. It had 4 CDs in it. They call them multi-disc drives as well. You literally load up one disc at a time. Maybe you've got one in your car. Maybe you've had one at your home stereo. Basic same thing. It holds the disc, accesses them one at a time into the reader. Just like that big jukebox I was talking about at the Bureau of Public Debt, these discs can be indexed at one at a time. Now, the bad thing is anytime you did a DIR or Open My Computer, it had to index each one of those CDs so that it could display each CD as a drive inside My Computer, so it kind of slowed things down. But back when you needed to have the CD in order to get things done, having a multi-disc or a jukebox was very, very important. Last but not least, booting. Since 1998, your BIOS in your PC probably has supported the El Torito support that allows for CDs or optical drives to boot inside your machine. What is it? The El Torito is just a specification that was designed and developed by two guys eating at a restaurant called El Torito when they make their specifications. Mount Rainier, El Torito, all these names, High Sierra, all came from different areas of places where people were working when they wrote the specification. The orange book, yellow book, green book, all purple book, all were the color of the notebook that they put the specification data into, and that's where those names come from. So don't think a whole lot into the whole El Torito concept, but know that if it's El Torito compliant, you can actually boot up a disk and make it run from optical disks that allow you an additional thing. So the ultimate boot CD, booting up all the operating systems and getting them to work, all because of the El Torito specification. You can actually go out and make a bootable CD-ROM disk if you follow the right instructions and go through the right process. Usually you have to have some kind of DVD burning program. Software packages came with the DVD drives and the CD-ROM drives. Nero comes to mind as being one that would allow you to create data disk and bootable disk and copy disks, and it just made copying and using the DVD drives and making them work a whole lot easier, so that you could make copies of your DVDs and bootables and that kind of stuff. So it was just a whole lot easier to use a software package like Nero to make all that work for you. So that's pretty much the gist of this chapter. I think they do talk a little bit about LightScribe in this chapter, and disk tattoo. Basically what those are discs that actually you could use the laser to engrave pictures onto. If you didn't use them, you could actually tattoo some information. There was even ones that actually would write the table of contents around the disk with the laser into the media or the substrate so that you could read what the table of contents were without ever putting labels on it. So some really crazy little side things that existed out there in the optic field to give you some creativity there. But for the most part, optics is fading away quickly, mainly because with all the flash drives, we have the ability to store pretty much anything we want on very large drives, and we don't need the smallness of the optical drive. I still believe that optical drives exist out there for a purpose. They are a much better long-term storage even than the flash drives, but the flash drives are pretty much taken over for what's out there. I also ran across an article about a 360 terabyte optical storage. Now, if you're a big Superman fan, when the Superman goes out to meet his parents in the ice caves or whatever, he puts this crystal in, and from the crystal comes these hologram images that he can actually see and record data on. That's not too far-fetched from what this optical 360 terabyte storage capability is. It's basically a crystal that you could write all sides on and write in-depth it into the crystal itself to do that storage. Now, they talked about it years ago. I haven't heard a lot about it since, so it probably doesn't even exist anymore, or the technology costs too much to move forward, or that the new technology of flash drives and flash memory has probably superseded the ability and the need for that kind of storage. But I thought it was a pretty cool concept where you could actually store data on multi-sided crystals and then put the crystal into a reader and then get all kinds of information out of it, kind of like the Superman learned about his parents. So that's kind of some crazy stuff that's in there. Next, we'll talk a little bit about troubleshooting, and then we'll come back and look at the hardware itself and take a good in-depth look at all the different drives that I've got and their interfaces so that you get just some idea of what it looks like inside a DVD drive as well as the interfaces that they connect them. Real quickly, let's go over the installation of a CD-ROM driver or CD-ROM into a DOS environment. I know we talked about it way back when in that first class, talk about a little bit about the DOS. But this is something I also want you to try in class, just in case you ever find yourself in the need to do so. You can find a way to get your CD-ROM drive to exist in your DOS environment so that you could use it or work with it should you need to do so. Now, it's basically two parts. One is in the config sys file. You use the command device equals c:\DOS mycdrom.sys switch d:/mycd001. And basically, the device is the device command. It calls out a device driver. Where's the device driver? In the DOS directory under this circumstance. Could be anywhere. The driver itself is mycdrom.sys. I think Oak CD-ROM is what you'll use in class. And then d:/mycd001 is a drive name. I just made it up, but you could make it up with pretty much anything that you want. You have to have a device name, otherwise the next line won't work. Then the auto exec batch file, c:\Windows, again, is the path. mycdexe.exe, which is the Microsoft extension to allow communication through the DOS world to an optical drive. And then the device name itself, again, drive name mycd001. And if you want, you can put the switch L: in here and assign it a drive letter. In this case, the drive letter would be X, but I could put anything where X is to get that drive letter in place. Once you create these auto exec and config sys files and reboot the machine with these two files in place, you will then get access. It'll say I found a device on the first line, and then I assigned the device a name on the second line or a drive letter so you could access it. So that's just a little DOS exercise to get a CD up and running should you choose to do so in the DOS environment. Let's take a quick second to review just a few things about troubleshooting of a DVD or CD or optical drive. There is some steps of troubleshooting on starting on page 649 in your book, and it walks through quite a few different scenarios. I took a couple of them we'll talk about a little bit. You can look at those again on your own and check out what some of those scenarios are. But the first one kind of covers a lot of things. If the drive fails to read any disk, that means anything you put in it won't read. Check the discs for scratches. Look and see if there's scratches on there. Dirt, fingerprints, that kind of stuff can lead the disc to not be readable. And when you go to clean it, you try to clean it off. Don't polish it. Don't go in a circle. Start at the center and work your way out. The reason being is because the tracks are in a spiral groove around there. If you work in that groove, chances are you could scratch the entire groove and lose data. If you start from the center and work your way out, chances are you'll just scratch across and data can still be captured after that if you do choose to scratch the disk or get the disk scratched by accident. Obviously, enough scratches, the disk will no longer work. Flying it across the room, landing on the floor, give your disk to a 2-year-old and you'll find out how quickly this non-destructible media is destructible. Check your drive for dust and dirt. Make sure there's no dirt or dust in there. If you haven't used it in a while, dirt can accumulate over the optics, making it very difficult to read. Make sure the drive shows up in my computer, this computer. If it's not there, don't expect the DOS or the operating system to find it. If it can't find it in the operating system, you're never going to be able to make it work any other way. Try a known good disk for sure. One that you work in a different machine and works just fine, put it in this machine and see that it works. Always remember, too, that CDs and DVD drives look exactly the same. Make sure you're aware of whether you're trying to read a DVD in a CD-ROM drive or you're trying to read a CD in a DVD-ROM drive. Now, DVDs will read CDs and anything before it. Blu-ray disc will read DVDs, CDs, and all that. But CDs won't read DVDs or Blu-ray discs. DVDs won't read Blu-ray disc. So they're downward compatible, not upward compatible. So always remember to make sure you have the right media in your hand. Restart the computer. That solves most of the problems. Everybody knows it. Bounce it, restart it, reboot it, whatever you want to call it. See if the problem goes away. Remove the drive from Device Manager. Trash it, throw it away, delete it, and then have the computer look for a drive again, or just reboot the machine one more time. Maybe this time it'll find the drive, reestablish connection with it through the driver, and reestablish the positive connectivity that you're looking for. Failure to read certain disks. Now, this can happen with burners or DVD drives. I've always had problems with burners just not liking some kinds of disk where they like some and don't like others. The chemistry, the gold, the inlay, the organic dye, the things about the disk that are makeup of the disk cause it to not be readable in every single drive. In fact, most of the rewritables, the standard CD-ROM drives, don't really like to read those disks because their reflectivity is very low and they can't tell the difference between a pit and a land. Failure to work or a PATA drive runs real slowly. Now remember, master and slave runs real slowly. I had a teacher come to me once and said, all of my movies are running in slow motion. So I'm like, I don't think I understand. But when I played them, sure enough, they were running in slow motion. What it had turned out to be is that he had flipped his data cable around and used the long end for his DVD drive and the two closer connectors for the DVD and the hard drive, and that is not a good plan. So he actually lost speed, and that delay that happened between the two drives and that longer part of the cable actually caused a delay in his. I wouldn't have believed it had I not turned the cable around myself and tried it, but that was definitely what it is. And then master and slave jumper settings on DVDs and CDs can actually cause it grief as well, so you got to be careful. And then last but not least, the drive door won't open. We've got little drive tools that I'll show you in the little hardware video that can stick in a hole in the front to push it open, because most of them are belt driven, and after that DVD or CD sits there for a while, that belt becomes a little pliable or a little squishy, and it doesn't quite grip, and that means that it won't open on its own. But once you get it pushed open a little bit and you can pull it open, you can push it back, you can usually get it up and running again, and you'll be able to read it that way. So this is not every scenario that could happen with a DVD disc that's failing, but it's a few, and there are a few more in your book. We can't talk about every single possible failure. I've never been a big fan of the troubleshooting steps in this book either. Troubleshooting is self-inflicted or self-failure, and you'll figure out which one is which when you put enough of them in and work with them enough yourself. Okay, let's take a look at some of the optical hardware that I've collected over the years and see what we can find about some of the differences in the hardware. So we'll take a look here at this drive here. Was one of the first drives I ever installed. This is that books in print. This is the controller card we would plug into the ISA bus down here, plug into the system. There'd be an internal cable that could work here or an external cable that could go external to the machine. This being the drive, one of the first drives anyway. I don't know if it's the exact original or not, but it's pretty much there. It has a caddy system that opens up and allows the drive to come out. And notice with this particular caddy, the actual disc itself, the whole laser assembly comes out. This is the spinner, the hub, and then the actual laser itself is right here. That will read back and forth as it moves back and forth. That's very unusual for a caddy to move the whole laser system in and out as well. On the top of it here, it talks about our logical unit number. This is a SCSI drive, 0 through 7 with the dip switches. And if you take a look at what's on the back here, you'll see a basic standard power, 5 volts and 12, a 50 conductor SCSI cable. And then your ID selection switch, the 3 position there, and you can set your ID to 0 through 7. And then here is a little audio connection that would actually allow connectivity to the audio card itself. Another controller card similar to that one, and this one is this guy here, another ISA bus controller. Had a very short cable on the inside of it, very unique interface, nothing that we've talked about so far, but it does have this audio patch cable, and if you notice, it goes back to the back side of this disk drive. And on here we have this is a very strange max main cable interface that goes with this particular card. It's got a strange connector here. It's just very unique in its nature all the way around. It's nothing like we normally have. That's a special connector that goes just to the card. And that's kind of what the CD-ROM kits were all about in the very beginning, is that they were kit style. This guy here is the caddy version. Remember I told you could put a disc in a caddy, and then this caddy would then go inside of the drive here. And if you notice, it just kind of opens up and the drive goes in there and it would go in. And then you could use the caddy system. This, as well as the other one, was a SCSI interface, and on the back side of this you can see a little bit more about that SCSI interface. Again, the audio output for playing audio CDs, a special patch cable for that, your logical unit number, ID number, and then your SCSI interface, 50 conductor, and then your power over here. So it's pretty common in the beginning for them all to be SCSI. And again, if you look at this caddy, if I open it, you'll see there's the disc on the inside, and then the drawer closes. It's kind of like some of that removable media we saw before. And take a look inside a basic CD-ROM drive. Here's the hub clamping area.
and the laser itself moving on an assembly that moves forward. This guy comes in as the drive table or the tray comes in. It's going to move itself up into position, and there's basically a magnet in this wheel as well as on the roof of the actual drive itself that clamp that CD in here. When I place the CD in, it gets clamped into this position and allows it to move. So there's some drive motors and mechanisms here, and this one is more like the IDE variety of the drive, so it has a master-slave jumping, but even still has the audio connection and a power connection on the back side of it, so you get some idea what that looks like. We talked a little bit about what a TrueX is. This is the Kenwood TrueX drive. The Kenwood TrueX drive is the drive that allows TrueX connectivity from one spot to the next. It is a drive that literally reads the same, no matter where it's at on the disk, the same true value back and forth. And remember, this actual CD is a CD audio player as well. So you literally could plug your headphones in, put a CD in, and without the control of the actual machine, it would play the CD, and you could listen to the CD with your headphones and adjust the volume here, because every CD ever made had to play music CDs, whether it was for data or for audio. This guy, another version of the IDE interface. It is a 36X. Remember that 36X basically is doing the same thing. Now this one actually has the stop and the play controls right on the front of it, as well as an audio connectivity and a volume knob doing the same thing. So again, it could play CDs right out of the box, and you could plug it in and power it up and it'll play them. So it is a basic CD player. If we take a look at the back side of this guy, we'll see that we've got our basic PATA interfaced here. We have our power down here. We have the master slave jumping. CS is cable select, SL is slave, and MA is master. And notice the jumper is in this position, so it's set up to be the master. This guy here is our audio interface. Right, ground, and left are GG and L. And then this would be a digital interface for a digital audio output to allow some connectivity there in case you had a direct audio or digital audio input to your sound card. And we'll talk more about sound cards when we get that far. Basic tray operation here. This tray comes out, goes in and out. Some people call it the old cup holder because it is pretty sturdy. These guys were pretty sturdy. This is a Hewlett-Packard. This is the Shore Store CD Writer 6020. That's probably the second or third generation CD writer that existed out there. And it is Easy Write enabled. That little line there says I'm an Easy Writer, and again, still plays audio CDs the same fashion. But this guy was one of the first burners that ever existed out there, of the CDR variety. So we got that going for us. If you take a look at the box or the disc here, this is a DVD-RW, so it is a DVD multi-recorder, DVD-R and dual layer RW, so you can burn pretty much any disc that you want to have in it, and it is of the IDE PATA variety. Again, master slave. This one is on cable select. The jumper's on cable select, but you still have the digital analog audio, the IDE cable, and your power interface. And then this one here, last but not least of the drive-wise, is your basic kind of thing as well. It is a Write Master DVD multi-layer multi-recorder Speed Plus drive. It is of the SATA variety. And notice the cabling gets a whole lot easier back here. You got your 7-pin conductor for data and your 15-pin for power, and no other jumpers or nothing else to get you confused or lost, making it very, very simple and very easy to get yourself drive and get it connected and hooked up. You can take a look at some of the different media here. You can look at the beginning is the CDRW and the CDR. This one's a printable surface, so you can print right on them. This one's just a rewritable surface, and if you look, you can kind of tell whether or not it's being rewritten. It kind of looks like a silver or more aluminum effect. This one is more of a gold effect on the CDR. And I believe it's bad. What do you think? So this one be all scratched up as well, but it is an example. And then of course you can see, I can see right through it. That hole right there means that the data area is completely missing. which means that it's never going to be able to be read again. That's a little bit hard to that. I've got one that if you put it in a microwave, definitely will clean it up a little bit. That's the pure polycarbonate that they're actually made with and stored on, so that you could use that. A DVD-R looks a little bit different too. It's got more blue in color inside the DVD-R category. This is just your basic DVD-R cheapo disc running at single speed. This one here is an RW, or no, it's also a DVD-R, looking a little bit different, but this one has been used. You can see where the data area actually has been burned in there, so you can see the difference between the burned area and the non-burned area. This guy here, another disc. This is a dual-sided disc as well. Not sure exactly what this one is. They can't really read anything on it to tell me, but you can see the gold in color. They say the gold had a longer lifespan than the silver. And then this one here, being a DVD dual layer, you can see it's definitely got much more blue in color, blue tint to it, that organic dye that's inside of there. 2 layers, and it's also a printable one, so you can print right on that surface. I have a printer that will actually do that. And then last but not least, this is that disc I was talking about, Disc Tattoo, and allows you, and you can see in the picture that you can label your own disc the cool way, kind of like a tattoo on somebody's arm there. You can label around the area of the disc that you don't use. 80-minute or 700 megabytes, still brand new and not open. So this is a CDR disc. Just a different method of trying to keep us happy and making it creative in order to sell more discs and make things work. So that being said, that is the hardware. Oh wait, one last thing I wanted to show you. This is a box on how it's sold here at the store. This is a 16x DVD plus R, plus minus R, plus minus RW drive, DVD plus minus R dual layer or double layer. Notice the different read speeds for each one of the functions. 16x for DVD plus R, 16x for DVD dash R, 8x for DVD RW, 6x for DVD dash RW, 4x for DVD plus R dual layer, and 4x for DVD plus R dual layer as well. And if you look, it actually comes with 2 different bezels, so it could match the front of your case as well. And then on the side here, I wanted to show pretty much all the different things that it says it will do. This guy has a different read speed. Package contains, that's not what I wanted. Where is what I wanted? Somewhere on here it shows me all the different writing speeds. So you can see the DVD writing, DVD reading, all the speeds that go along with it. This drive is capable of reading and writing and doing pretty much anything you could want a drive to do. It has pretty much everything that you could use a drive for. And if you look over here in English, it says all the different compatibilities. Support format for DVD-ROM, DVD video, CD-DA, CD-ROM video, CD, photo CD, CD text, and CD extra. Windows 98, SE, ME, 2000, and XP. It'll pretty much work everywhere. It is a CD, DVD burner, writer, and all those other things all combined together. So jack of all trades is pretty much how they all sell these days, so we can pretty much give whatever we want. So in the world of hardware and DVDs, you know, there's one drive fits all these days, and it'll pretty much do everything. The only thing I don't have is a Blu-ray disc, so if you got one sitting around your house that you're about ready to throw away, send it on in, we'll use it, add it to the collection. All right, that pretty much wraps up the subject of optical hardware. We'll go into the lab and we'll put some optical hardware in, and we'll learn a little bit more about it there. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.